I remember in one of our last rehearsals or conversations, I think it might have been just a conversation. I was speaking to our rehearsal director, Mehneer, Sudan, and I was thanking her for stepping in at the moment where she did because Wing was actually going from sort of childhood to adolescence, and now we're at the stage where it has a more tangible form, and as we're able to perform it, then it might grow into a more adult form, if you want to take that kind of metaphor. So I think maybe that's how I feel like. And also, once we were speaking, maybe all together, Dali, Supriya, Mehneer, and I, and it feels sometimes when we finish creating a piece like you're starting all over again when you're performing it, because it's just the form is there, but it's now what's the journey in that form and in that piece. For me, it's quite particular because I've been a choreographer for many years, but I've choreographed on pieces where I've also performed. So I've lived through that experience of working on building a form and a shape to something, and then giving it life, performing through it. This time, I wasn't on stage and I wasn't through it in the same way. So
So I only came in end August, actually, in the process. End August is when I started going for rehearsals. So end August to November is when I was part of the project. Um, and to me, actually, it really felt like felt like home because I felt like I'm with very like-minded people. Supriya and I have known each other for a long time. Dali also have known for a while. And so yeah, I was just thrilled and excited. And it also came at a very nice time because I had quit my job in Feb and I wasn't really doing anything and I wasn't looking for work. I wasn't looking for anything. I wasn't looking for anything. And
mm.
so it just kind of landed in my lap. Supriya was very nice to, I mean, they all were very nice to include me. And in the beginning, I was a little hesitant because I also, I mean, we all sort of organically were trying to figure out what my role is. I was the one present if watching live rehearsals. So I was kind of like Sonia's eyes. Um, and yeah, I didn't want to do too much. I didn't want to impose how I was looking at the piece. And so I wanted to like, so I obviously, so we always had conversations, Sonia and I would go back and forth about, yeah, what her vision is and what she is looking for. And yeah, so it was just, I mean, I just loved, I'd seen a work in progress earlier and I just loved the dance. I just loved the piece already the first time I saw it. And, and I kind of understood also what the challenges were. And so, yeah.
Actually, the topic was really interesting when Sonia first proposed it, and I thought it was such a unique opportunity. I'd always admired Supriya's dance and Sonia's dance, and Sonia's choreographic sense. So I was really excited to try something new. And this idea of creating something as a duet with Sonia choreographing from the outside was really interesting, but the topic also was really interesting. She had first read a book that inspired her. It was called Women Who Fly. It was about female, what was it exactly? Like
I think it was
mythological
women, and
characters.
yes, I think it.
Throughout history, throughout world history, really, and how they'd been portrayed. And so that was kind of what started her thinking about this project. But then we sat down and we did a lot of brainstorming about what we actually wanted to do with the piece, and we kind of settled on birds. And I absolutely loved the topic. One thing that I really liked about the topic was that for the first time I was delving into Odissi dance, but not really taking on any mythology. We were just observing simple little creatures that we watch all the time, and they're kind of just available to us, and everybody can relate to it. And birds they're simple, yet there's a lot of layers to them. And so we ended up exploring things like their kind of jittery energy of the small birds, and the moment a bird takes flight, how it kind of changes, transforms, its energy transforms. So there were so many things to explore just looking at these beautiful little creatures. So birds have this ability to have a really micro view of the world when they're on the ground, but then they also have a really nice macro view of the world. They get to see everything, they get to travel, they migrate from place to place. And so I think we talked extensively about what it means to us, and maybe we put a lot of these ideas into the piece. Not sure how much of it translated, but it was such an interesting topic to delve into.
I think in different ways, people engaged in different ways. The feedback we got, I think some people, there was a consistency in people talking about how it was very relaxing to watch and sort of meditative to watch. There's one person who sent some written feedback and said it was a mood that, you could just be in that mood. And I think that's an interesting kind of feedback to think about, because usually what we do as Odissi dancers is we explain ourselves a lot, we are doing this, and now this will happen, that will happen. The music is doing this, but I think the possibility that was what, we couldn't have known it when we started the project, but I think as we got into it, I think what we realized was that there's the possibility of expressing something that doesn't have to be necessarily based on something like a narrative or that we are taking you from point A to point B, but we can just be in a moment and see what that does. I think the other thing people commented on quite a bit was that we stayed with the form, but that we were doing it differently in terms of the music. And I think there was, what I sort of took away from those interactions was that people had time to just dwell in a space, to breathe, and the music actually allows for a lot of that. Even when we listen to it, we feel it. And hopefully the dance too, that you can just not for the two of us on the inside, but maybe for people watching, that there's moments to just breathe and just be in that moment.
as we were making it, and we have a section which is called, we call it the precarious section, etc., etc. But there was an undercurrent of hope, I think, that we felt we had to get back to within the piece, you know, just for our own, you know, well-being. And it's a piece that I think in Odissi, it is something a little different. The fact that three Odissi dancers came together and, you know, were able to, with a bigger team, make something like this. Absolutely kudos to Sonia's vision, because I think she kind of she knew what, she was very clear, I think, about what she could possibly achieve with this. And I hope we get to travel with it. At least, you know, I hope we get to show it a few more times. It would be fun for us. And also, now that it's actually being put in front of an audience, I think now we can kind of, you know, relax into it, discover more possibilities within the piece. So it would be nice if the possibility of some kind of more audience engagement is there.
Yeah.
I thought it was interesting because the piece is like there are no words to the piece. I mean, it's all a musical score. So a lot of it is left up to people's interpretation. Oftentimes, I think classical pieces don't leave very much room for that. Pallavis do. But it was really, really interesting getting the audience's feedback on what they saw, what they thought what the storyline was. So I think that was really a fun thing for me to, I think for all of us, to kind of hear back from audiences what their interpretation. And there is no right or wrong. So it's one of those, we actually, even within the piece, while we were choreographing the piece, and Sonia also left it fairly open-ended for us, so Supriya and I, to add a lot of ourselves into the piece. And often enough, even our stories don't really match. Mehneer made us do one very interesting exercise where we stepped out and she said, you guys should perform it for each other. So Dali performed it for Supriya, Supriya performed it for Dali. And then we realized that we actually we are creating different worlds, actually, both of us. We move differently a little bit, and our energies are quite different. So it was interesting because we do come together, our movements are coordinated, but our energy that we bring, our personalities, it left a lot of room. And so even we don't necessarily always interpret it in the same way. So that was a fun thing. And yeah, we got some very interesting interpretations of it.
I think one of the struggles here was to, even if for my training I'd spent, you know, a good amount of time in either in Delhi or in Bhubaneswar, maybe more in Delhi, definitely to work on choreography in Odissi dance, it was a little bit difficult to find artists to work with in Canada, just because then there's the numbers to, you know, to find who, and then to find the correct person or persons to build a team with, that, you know, they want to work with you, you want to work with them. We think we're all going to get along, because that sharing a same dance form really does not mean that you know, a production will be successful at all. And I think that's I discovered quite quickly that I was interested in creative work. Here in Canada, there is a lot, I feel like there's a lot of emphasis in the artistic world on creating, you know, new works. And it's a conversation that we have in the community here that, the circulation of work, whether it's traditional ballet or sort of, what we would call traditional in other forms, is not as valued as creating new. That is something that exists, but at the same time, for me, it was not at all that kind of influence that was happening. I've always been interested in creating work. It's really been something that I was drawn to, and it came up and it popped out quite quickly. So yeah, I do remember when Dali mentioned that, and I think at that point it's always, things just tend to happen when they do. Um, and in the pandemic, it happened in the pandemic, but it happened especially because I started a course in university, um, on meditation and the creative process. And in the course, I was, they were asking us to work on a tangible creation, on something that you're working on. So there was kind of an impetus to start working on an idea. And that idea came to me, but I had been wanting to withdraw from performing. And so at that point, I remember, Supriya, I was working on putting together a little bit of like a Odissi teaching tool. And we had been exchanging a lot in that. I find that I needed lots of support. I don't know, working with the kids that I'd been teaching, and we were exchanging ideas on how we're teaching, what we're teaching. And I guess that also made me go towards them and want to share this idea with them a little bit, really naturally at that point. I mean, apart from the fact that I just found they're amazing human beings and, wonderful dancers. Um, yeah. So I didn't really feel at that point that the distance would be such of a, so much of a challenge. And looking back at it today as well, if I look at all of the other creative processes I was in, even when there's not a geographic distance, there's a time distance. Artists are busy. So you never have time to work together, even if you were, a street apart. So I think that, even with geography, I wish at some point we would have had more time together. But at the same time, um, ultimately, in some creative processes, they do end up being kind of spread out in chunks of like, let's work 3 weeks to a month really intensively, then a break. But not all of them. Of course, some pieces, you're working on it for a month, it's done. It just really depends what you're working on and how you're working, who you're working with. If I maybe go from, I'll start with Anuj, for example, who, I guess maybe my sad uh, feeling is that I didn't really get to work with him in person. So that I would have really, really enjoyed with him. Mehneer, I got to meet, but I feel like we approached him. We had actually, Anuj and I spoke in 2023 when we were starting to think about lighting ideas. And he's, been very involved in filmmaking, and it wasn't too sure if we were going to have the great privilege of having him aboard with us. But 2024, we spoke again, and it worked to my great happiness. So I feel like he got that filmmaking and general arc and broad view and sentiment. He just really was able to see that in the piece very quickly and very easily and seamlessly. And um, we spoke about creating a universe for Dali and Supriya for the piece. And that, with his experience of working with image, with installation, with lights, I could see that immediately, his proposals were very rich. Whether, for example, some of the side lights contraptions that he worked, designed especially for us. The projections were not something that we had, discussed, asked for, but he saw something, he proposed it. And I guess that even at the end, I feel that we were all we allowed ourselves to play. I didn't want to say, no, no, we can't go into that direction because there's not enough time to experiment it. But at the same time, it was getting close to the production, so we weren't too sure. But he just really proposed something very subtle, very rich, that actually helped create this kind of a little bit of an eerie feel, a very that I didn't even know I was looking for, but I was for that for this the moments in that section of the piece where the projection came in. So it helped create that one layer of meaning that was actually missing. So, and those things, they just, at some point you have to trust that it's going to happen because it does happen. If you leave that little bit of space for someone to do something.
I think it's been a very weird project for me in a way that, like, pleasantly weird, because I think Sonia got in touch with me last year at some point, uh, say about a year and a half ago, and we had a brief chat. I had never met this person. She just came from a very strong friends connection. And, but from within a call, I realized that, there is this similarity that Mehneer was talking about. I realized that there is some similarity. I couldn't understand what that similarity is. I just her way of talking is different than I talk. Her way of working is actually different than how I work. Uh, but still, there was some kind of a connection on a basic phone call when you're just proposing, rather not even proposing, you're just meeting as makers. So she's just having a chat with me, telling me about herself. She's asking me about me. I'm telling her about myself. And I just remember coming out of that conversation thinking that, you know, our worlds are actually very different, but this connection is interesting. I want to understand this, or maybe at least try to articulate it at some point. Weirdly, I had to say no to her at that point of time because I was just too busy with other projects. And it's just so happened that we didn't work, decided to not work together. Then she was here in India at a point where she was also, the work in progress was showcased at OddBird. And surprisingly, we didn't even meet then because I couldn't make it for that sharing. But to another 6 months later, I get a call from her again saying that, listen, we had spoken earlier and it couldn't work out, but do you think it can work out now? And that's when I felt that, if it's recurring, this connection needs to now be articulated. And I think my pull into that was, one, this connection, and second, that it was being showcased at OddBird,
Right.
which is where that the two hats thing comes in, because I feel that as a visual designer, I feel that a huge part of the presentation is the the visual and oral experience of watching a performance. Having said that, I have seen tons of works in different forms in the live medium where uh, honestly visual design is almost just happens to be. It's just that it's the performance and the form is so strong that sometimes I feel that a lot of things don't really need a design.
Mm.
uh, so I don't know. So my approach to design also has been that I think the first kind of responsibility as well as the uh, the responsibility and the role of any design is functionality. And
Mm.
perhaps quite often at times I've felt that maybe a no design is the functionality.
Mm.
So you could be um looking at a performance where the design elements are intentionally very easy and very low, and that is the design, right? Quite often we confuse design with a lot of show, you
Yeah,
know.
fair enough.
So but when it came to this and I wanted to just find that articulation for the connection that I was trying to feel,
Mm.
uh, I realized that let me get into rehearsal. And the moment I got into rehearsals, by the way, I'm also somebody like as a designer, I generally stay away from dance because I feel like, especially uh, dances that have a classical base in terms of
Mm.
form, because I feel like that I don't really have the articulation for it. I don't have the literacy of
Language.
language. But here, for some reason, the moment I've attended the first rehearsal, I realized that it's not that space. Like, um, there's a very deliberate attempt to not be in a particular way, or rather, not be in any particular way.
Mm.
And that was maybe it's a product of course, that's Sonia's vision, but it's
Yeah.
also a product of all these different elements coming together. Like as Mehneer said that her training has primarily been in Kathak, but here is Odissi. Jonathan's music, from what we understand, as a classical performance music, has is not at all that. You know, it's I find that even transcending the medium, I find it very cinematic at times.
Mm.
I
Mm. Mm.
Yeah. So I think that's what pulled me in as well. Like this ability to not be stuck with form or in terms of feeling, not medium. Of course, it's the live medium. So yeah, that's what pulled me in. And to the ability to, present it at OddBird, where I have the liberty to, change around any and everything,
Great.
right from the equipment to the orientation to the extra elements that are not in the space and I want to bring in for design, say certain contraptions. That ease was very refreshing to experience.
And also, it's important for the performers to know what they want to say, of course.
Mm.
It might not be important for the audience to understand exactly that I am saying, right now I'm brushing my teeth or
Yeah.
whatever, but I need to know. So the performers needed to have their story, their
Yeah.
narrative through the piece, actually. And
Mm.
that's where I came in, where in Nest, for example, Dali gave this example that I
Yeah.
said,
Yeah.
think silly, think like get rid of the Odissi interacting with the audience in a certain way and looking at the audience in a certain way. And just, in fact, before they went on stage, I said, embody the bird. So
Mm.
those kinds of things, I know that Sonia and I had very similar ways of thinking about these things. So it just worked. So yeah, the all the sections had names. I don't know if I should be giving the names away, but I don't know if Sonia's okay with that.
Mm.
And the names kind of gave us a direction for the intention. And so,
Maybe you can give
um,
us an example, if not all
an
the names, right?
example,
Like
yeah.
one a
So
particular section.
the first one was Nest, and
Yeah.
And there was a section where they had used text. Both of so Dali and Supriya had both earlier previously used some poetry and um, to develop their own that section where the projection comes in actually to develop their own movement phrase. So and there were none of like not Sonia, not Dali, not Supriya. Nobody was saying that this should look like suddenly now we are doing a piece full of expression with just not the body, more expression and saying something important about because the poetry was about um what forgotten, but I mean, like nature and something, something, something.
Sure.
Um, but yeah, just kind of finding what the essence of that movement phrase was for them
Hmm.
and what they wanted to say through it.
Hmm. Hmm.
It didn't have to match. They both didn't
Hmm.
need to say the same things. We worked on different combinations of where they would be placed and how, we really liked. Earlier, they were not even together on stage. Supriya was going to walk out and make an exit. So just, yeah, sticking to what essence is coming out for them
Yeah.
and just honing in on that kind of